It is now my honor to introduce President and Chair Mission Blue, Sylvia Earle. Also known as her deepness. Sylvia is a legendary oceanographer and explorer. Amongst her many pioneering achievements, Sylvia was the first female scientist to descend 100 feet below the ocean surface. She served as the first female chief scientist of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and was named by Time magazine the first ever hero for the planet. Here is her deepness. Miss Sylvia, would you like this?
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you. Now I'm Her Highness. At least higher. Well, thank you for that great welcome. I'm really privileged to be here for those whose fate really rests with us. The fish don't vote. The future humans are not here. It's up to us, it's up to you, it's up to each of us, all of us together, to take this incredible moment in time and make the most of it. Think back to 1945. People were really weary with the consequences of two devastating world wars. The United Nations was formed. It was really inspired by humanity's desire to promote a peaceful relationship among ourselves. It's kind of a work in progress, I'd say. But now, early in the 21st century, it's increasingly obvious that for us to prosper, we must promote a peaceful relationship with the planet. It's the only place in the solar system, and likely in the universe, that's hospitable for life as we know it. Now we know that it's kind of important, maybe essential, for us to make peace with the ocean. You know, today, honoring World Ocean Day, you heard UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres observe that it's time to realize that to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the objectives of the Paris Agreement on climate change, we urgently need collective, together action to revitalize the ocean. And you just heard that maybe we need to focus on revitalizing ourselves, our attitude about the ocean, about nature. John Kerry, the US voice for climate action, has notably said that in order to solve the climate crisis, we have to solve the ocean crisis. In order to solve the ocean crisis, we have to solve the climate crisis. It's all connected. Now we know. We did not know that when World Ocean Day was launched in 1992. Well, you might have suspected it, but it wasn't as clearly evident as it is now, 30 years later. At the 1992 UN Conference on Sustainable Development in Rio de Janeiro, and later in 2008, when the World Ocean Day was officially designated by the UN General Assembly, and 40 years after the most famous image of Earth from space was taken, Earthrise, more than 40 years, here we are, 2023. That was 1968. I recently met with Bill Anders, who's the astronaut who famously took that image, Earthrise. He said, as much as he loves that image of Earth from space that really set in motion a change in our attitude about ourselves, about where we are in the universe, he said the image he really loves the most is that blue face of the planet image. We're looking out and seeing the Pacific Ocean, and you just see blue. And he said, yeah, the world is basically blue. But what took us so long to realize that everything we care about, economy, health, security, our existence, it's all here in this little blue speck in a universe that's not very friendly otherwise to the likes of us. Even Earth as it was until fairly recent in Earth history, recent times, was not a friendly place. Think about what it was like, let's say 1 billion years ago, when oxygen had not reached the level that we now take for granted. That Earth was populated mostly by microbes, no elephants, no birds, no fish, no us for sure. It's taken a long time, but think about how quickly we have unraveled that long history of fine-tuning the planet in ways that make our existence possible. You know, now we know, and we now are faced with this really ambitious goal. By the end of this decade, by 2030, to do what it takes to reverse the damage that we've imposed in mostly a couple of centuries. Mostly in a few decades. We have really scaled up our impact since I was a kid, and certainly since Bill Anders took that picture of Earth from space. Since the United Nations was formed, you know, we can look back to a time, some of us remember a time when the world was a very different place, when there were more fish in the sea, more birds in the sky, more trees on the land. We've been witnesses to this great era of destruction, but it's also been coupled with a great era of learning, of knowing. We have unprecedented knowledge, and that's truly our best hope. You know, just by the numbers, it looks as though we're really successful as a species. Consider, going back 500 years ago, only about 500 million people occupied Earth. That was during the great era of what we call the great era of exploration. Never mind that the great era of exploration is really just beginning, but when, you know, ships were crossing the ocean in every which way and discovering places that were unfamiliar to most humans. But by 1800, that number had doubled, about 1 billion people. About 2 billion were around when I arrived. By 1980, that number had doubled to 4 billion. And now we're looking right at the edge of doubling that again. Nearly 8 billion of us, maybe 10 by the middle of this century, if that progression stays on track. So it looks like we're really successful. You know, we're the conquerors of the earth, some would like to think. But there's one potentially fatal flaw. Our prosperity has been fueled by consuming nature with a confident illusion that no matter how much we take, there would always be more. Our economic models are built on that assumption. But now we know that the global economy is overshooting Earth's finite capacity to support our expectations of a prosperous future. So fewer than 3 billion people existed in 1945 when the United Nations was formed, and knowledge about the blue part of the planet, the ocean, had advanced considerably since that first global exploration, the Challenger expedition at the end of the 1800s, 1872 to 76. But I think it's safe to say that more has been learned about the nature of the ocean, about the planet, who we are, where did we come from, where might we be going, how can we get to that place that we might want to get to, than during all preceding history since the middle of the 20th century, that era that geologists now mark as the Anthropocene. We've created so much change since the middle of the 20th century that geologists acknowledge that our mark is literally written in stone. We are now in an age of humankind. But now we know what no one could know in the middle of the 20th century. That's when I first began exploring the ocean in the 1950s, and since then I've had years at sea, thousands of hours under the sea, living underwater, using little submarines, remotely operated vehicles, and now, this fantastic new era of technology. So not only am I a witness, we're all witnesses, and the kids are armed with knowledge that did not exist when I was a kid. Plenty of reason for hope, mostly because of the superpower of knowing. Think, nobody had been to the moon in the 1950s. Einstein was really smart that he didn't know what Earth looked like from space. No one knew how deep the ocean really was. We're still kind of figuring that out. We still don't quite know exactly how deep the ocean is, but we certainly know that life exists from the surface to the greatest depths. We didn't know that in the 50s, 60s. We're now the beneficiaries of those high in the sky, deep in the sea, of now decades of monitoring and crunching the numbers, of looking at the evidence. And we can see ourselves in perspective in ways that when the law of the sea that we heard about, 40 years ago, law of the sea, we didn't know much about what we now know of the laws of nature that really supersede laws that we would like to impose. 21st century children, they have to be the luckiest kids ever to come along, and all the rest of us are too. Because in spite of all the doom and gloom, wars, poverty, pandemic, whatever it is that makes you feel like a sense of despair, think of what we know. Imagine if we did not know. Now that would be a problem. If we did not know the trouble we're in because of excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, because of the tearing of the fabric of life. Elephants can't know these things. They're pretty smart. We know whales are smart, chimpanzees, really intelligent, cats, dogs. I know some pretty smart fish. But not only do they not know what the problems are, they probably know that the world has changed. They've experienced it in their, some of them have a very long lifetime. Tunas can be 30 or 40 years, orange roughy, older than your great-grandparents, more than a century. Elephants live a long time. Some sponges can be thousands of years old. Some corals can live that long in the deep sea. But not only do they not know what the problems are, they can't fix them, even if they knew. Up to us. It's especially up to us in the 21st century. And we're really fortunate, because if you don't know what the problems are, you can't fix them. But we do know, and we do have solutions. And for the rest of this morning, into the afternoon, we're going to hear some really savvy people talk about what those solutions might be. And even that's not enough. We've got to take that and then act on it. Knowing is a good start. Caring is the next step. But again, unless we do something, we're just talking. Now we know what our predecessors could not know. Where does air come from? What is it? And now we know every breath you take, every drop of water you drink, you are connected to the ocean, even if you've never seen or touched the ocean. The ocean touches every one of us every moment that we are alive. There is hope for a better, more prosperous future, a real future for us, if we act to safeguard healthy ocean systems and heal the harm caused by what we have put into the sea and what we have taken out of the ocean. You heard about actions Concerning plastics, yay, good news, we're acting on what we know. We need to act even more about what we're taking out of the ocean. We still have exaggerated expectations about what the ocean can deliver. We focus on illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing when actually the biggest problems are probably on the legal, subsidized industrial extraction of wildlife that has taken us to the loss of on the order of 90% of the sharks, tunas, swordfish, you name what it is that people like to eat, and even a lot of things that we don't eat but turn into products, turning wildlife into money, and in the process, really damaging the heart and even the soul of the ocean, because it's life in the ocean that shapes planetary chemistry, shapes the climate. Economists tend to follow the money, scientists tend to follow the carbon. And that takes you right into the ocean, right into the living ocean, where we have to think differently about the value of ocean wildlife. And we are thinking differently. I think that's the really good news of the 21st century. From above, astronauts, instruments, satellites, and from below, now we're beginning to really get serious about exploring the ocean. If only those Challenger scientists could know what we now know and be along on these expeditions that were just beginning to use the technologies that now exist that did not and could not exist before right about now. Now we can see the stark changes that are cause for concern. If present trends continue, look at the plastic problems, but we're doing something about that. We're taking some action. If we don't scale up our actions about looking at what we're putting into the air and into the ocean, the carbon dioxide, methane, global temperatures by the middle of this century will be too hot for most corals and kelps and other critical planetary boundaries that influence us will be transgressed, breaking through that, what we like to think of as a safety net of conditions that make Earth habitable for us, suitable for civilization. I mean, life will go on even if it gets pretty hot, or goes through another ice age, or if the chemistry changes, the microbes are likely to adapt. But I don't know that we have the capacity to turn and exist in circumstances that are on the horizon unless we can really take seriously what you're about to hear from in the presentations that will soon follow. If we did not know, we'd continue to do what we've always done, and according to present models, within 10 years, we'll reach those cataclysmic, irreversible tipping points that put at risk everything we care about: health, prosperity, security, even our existence. But we do know that by protecting life in the sea, we literally safeguard our own. We now know that our fate and the ocean, it's all together. They're one. From above and below, high in the sky, deep in the sea, what reasons do we now have for hope? In the 20th century, people acted to protect cherished places on the land and wild animals that they knew would be gone if we didn't do something about it. By 2000, about 12% of the land and a fraction of 1% of the ocean were proactively protected, with a global network of parks and policies aimed at saving wildlife and restoring planetary health. In the sea, as on the land, as caring replaces killing, the abundance and diversity of life shows signs of recovery. Now, about 15% of the land and pretty close to 3% of the ocean have high levels of protection, more both on the land and the sea, if you count various measures. But when you get serious, like just stop the killing, let nature really prosper, that's what really works, and it has worked. There are more turtles today than when I was a kid, sea turtles, that is. There's certainly more whales. We didn't stop commercially killing them globally until 1986, but it's already showing signs that it works. Now more than 70 nations are on board to having a high or full protection of at least 30% of the land, 30%, not 15, by 2030. And for the ocean areas under their jurisdiction, some are even looking at least half, 50% by 2050. What a concept. Treating the natural world as our life support system makes sense to me. And the more that we do understand and appreciate that, the better the chances we will continue to prosper. Actions are underway to spare large areas of the high seas from industrial fishing and deep sea mining. Some would like to see all of the high seas highly or fully protected as our life support system, the blue heart of the planet. Within 10 years, scientists aim to accurately map the entire sea floor with at least the accuracy that we have for Jupiter and Mars and the land on this planet. And there are other actions to explore, document, understand the physical and biological nature of that vast living space between the surface and the great depths below. Today, the best minds, some of the best anyway, among the 8 billion minds that now exist on Earth, are going to present some thoughtful themes about restoring, repairing, revitalizing the ocean, and maybe revitalizing our own human thinking. There are many pathways to making the world a better place for ourselves, and certainly for our kids, for our children, and for all those who will be around, not just centuries, but millennia in the future. But nothing else matters if we fail to respect the systems that underpin our existence. With knowing comes caring, and with caring, there is hope that we will protect the ocean as if our lives depend on it, because now we know they do. 2012, 20 years ago, at the World Conference on Sustainable Development in Rio. That was Rio plus 20. 40 years after that time when the World Oceans Day was first announced. So, the headline then should be today's headline. What is the future we want? We have choices. You have choices. No one can fix the problems alone. No individual, no community, no country. It takes all of us doing what we can. Find what it is that is our gift. What do we know? What can we do? What can you do? What can all of us together do? That is the theme of this 2022 World Ocean Day. Now is the time, as never before, and maybe as never again. By saving the ocean, we'll save ourselves. Thank you.